In today's video, I'm going to walk you guys through the 10 mistakes that I made as a real estate investor so that hopefully you can avoid them. Let's dive right in. The first mistake I made that I see real estate investors making over and over again is that I didn't market consistently. I would kind of do my marketing, pause, like I didn't want to spend money if I wasn't getting results. I'd wait until I got a deal under contract or even one closed, and then I would have to start all over again. The problem with that, it typically takes like 60 to 90 days from the time we pay for marketing till we've generated results back off of that. So it ended up that I was really only marketing like once a quarter versus building up that consistency. 2016, I did 6 deals. 2017, I did 74. A big part of that change was I simply marketed more. Real estate guys and gals kind of make me laugh because they're some of the only business owners I know that think they can do the same thing they've always done and expect better results. It would be like lifting the same amount of weight, the same amount of times in the gym forever and expecting one day you're just going to look like Arnold. The second mistake I made, and this one almost put me out of business, was I only had one cash buyer, and they ended up being kind of a dirtbag. They would do things like tell me they would buy the property, then not wire in for closing. Then after the fact, I caught them buying the deal from that seller and paying them more money. Made absolutely no sense. But after a couple times of that, I was like, hey, look, I'm going to go find somebody else. I'm not one to gloat off of someone's misfortune, but that particular buyer actually used my office address as their registered agent address for their companies, and I got all their foreclosure notices when they started defaulting on their private loans. I guess the old saying goes, kind of how you do something is how you do everything. So if he was screwing me over, apparently he was screwing other people over too. I know a lot of newbies have that fear, like what if somebody goes around me? And it does happen, but I can tell you it's extremely rare in my experience. I probably dealt with it 1 or 2 times out of the hundreds of deals that I've done at this point. The third mistake I made was not pulling permits on a project. This was probably the first and only time we ever did this, and we learned the hard way. The city inspector had a key from the previous owner and had before, during, and after pictures of all of our renovations. And it was kind of a good old boys club in a smaller town. And they gave us the option of using one of their 3 certified electricians to correct the work that we'd already done at probably like a 200 or 300% markup. So definitely learned the lesson on that one. You're going to be better off aligning yourself with county and using them as a resource. They might even bring you deals versus trying to, skirt and save a few bucks here and there. The fourth mistake I made early on was I took no for no. I was raised very Midwestern, very conservative, and that meant things like if you wanted to hang out with friends, you didn't ask in front of mom and dad. Similarly, if they said no, like it meant no, right? It wasn't ask me again. It wasn't go ask your dad. It was like end of conversation. And I started out in business that way. I'd make a seller an offer. I'd say, hey, here's where I'm at. They'd say, no, thank you. That's too low. And I'd say, great, have a blessed day and move on with my life. I mentioned earlier, 2016 to 2017, I went from 6 to 74 deals. And the 2 things that really changed there, 1, I started marketing consistently, and 2, I started following up on my offers. So one of my absolute favorite questions to ask is, what day do you need this property sold? So when they tell me, oh yeah, we'd really like to sell in 3 weeks or 6 weeks or 2 months, I enter that inside my Resimply CRM account and I follow up on that day if they told me no on my offer. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you mentioned you needed to close today. You headed to closing? No? Geez, you want to revisit my offer? I was surprised when I started following up how many deals I actually got from people that initially told me no. And sometimes it wasn't that kind of a no. The 5th mistake I made, and I made this one early on, the first flip I ever tried doing was a 600 square foot house, kind of in the hood. That in and of itself was a mistake, but it also had a shared driveway, which wasn't common. And then I also gave somebody their first project as a general contractor. They'd always been a sub. So it's kind of like the trifecta of all 3. I ended up actually selling that house to a We Buy Houses company. It was actually Homevestors, the We Buy Ugly Houses folks, when it wouldn't sell on the market. It's like, I don't know what to do. I ended up eating about $7,000 on that place. The only exit strategy that made any sense for anybody was to keep it as a rental. So learn from me, don't flip small houses in the hood and expect them to sell for retail to an owner-occupied buyer. The sixth mistake I made was not going all in on real estate faster. So I started in real estate back in like 2013, 14, and I didn't go full-time until 2016. But even when I went full-time, I wasn't really full-time. And I had this kind of identity thing where real estate for me was just a side hustle. I was also looking into affiliate marketing. I was also looking into Amazon. I was also looking into all these other things, right? Part of it, I think, stemmed from kind of that, like, oh, all millionaires have, 7 income streams. The reality of that is they make all their money in one and then add the others, has been what I've actually seen and kind of how it's played out in my own life. But if I'm being more blunt than that, I think the real reason for that was I didn't want to fail. So if I went all in on this real estate thing and it didn't work out, if it failed, that meant I, Ryan Dossey, was a failure. If it was one of 6 things I was doing, like, all right, that didn't work. I've got other irons in the fire, no big deal. The reality, though, is the more divided your focus is, the slower it's going to take for you to move things along. If I'm moving each thing 1 centimeter versus one thing 6 centimeters, like I'm going to get further faster if I'm focused on kind of a singular thing. The 7th thing I did wrong, and this one super sucked, was A, not having great contractors, but B, not knowing it until we were really, really, really deep with these folks. My recommendation, if you don't come from a construction background, is to find a local home inspector and lean on them heavily. You want somebody that can be like, hey man, this work quality kind of sucks. We got that feedback and it hurt. It was like, what do you mean? Like, I've paid an absolute fortune for it. What's wrong with it? But because I didn't come from construction, I didn't really know. I could kind of look at it and be like, okay, yeah, it's trim and level, but like, did they install it right? What's the material quality right? Did what I pay for it even make sense? There's kind of like almost 3 tiers of remodeling. There's like perfect, very well done. There's like decent, rental grady, and then there's like slumlord, Craigslist ghetto. One of our problems we had was we had a lot of kind of this mid-grade rental kind of quality that when we went to sell those places, when we no longer wanted to keep them as rentals, we weren't getting retail. Well, yeah, it kind of makes sense. Like, nobody's going to pay top dollar for something that's meh in condition. Not to mention, even from a rental standpoint, you're not going to get the best tenants if it's meh. So just keep that in mind. In Sold Fast, we're actually trying to split who our franchisees are between contractors and real estate investors. In our experience, it's actually a little bit easier for us to help a contractor scale because we're doing their marketing, we're taking their calls, we're teeing up the appointments, we're hiring an agent to help them comp and value stuff. They're punching in what the work is going to cost. We're telling them what to pay for it, what options to present. We can even help them with things like raising the money, doing the bookkeeping. So if they have the construction piece dialed, it might actually be a little bit of an easier climb. Whereas it's harder for us to teach guys like myself, no offense, that are real estate investors if construction is done well or not. Because the only way you really get that skill set is through doing it yourself. And like, let's be real, most of us don't want to be Chip Gaines. Our goal is to get into this to be home with our family more, work less, build something that kind of has this legacy. So it's kind of one of those skill sets, either you have it or you need to hire it. The 8th one kind of mirrors the 6th one, but this is just for me personally. These are my mistakes, right? Not your mistakes or common mistakes. And that's building call porter, ballpoint, CCF, and my real estate investing. Now, I think even knowing what I know now, like, I don't think I would go back and change anything. I absolutely love the opportunities Call Porter has afforded people. Like, I've got employees that have bought houses, taken trips, done all kinds of incredible things. I've got clients that have been able to do deals that would have never been able to invest in real estate because they couldn't take their phone calls. Same thing with Ballpoint. Like, we've made people more money than we can physically track. Even in CCF, I've gotten a lot of value out of working directly with people, kind of getting into the mess with them, knowing what's going on in their life when things are going well, not going well. At the time of filming this, those guys have reported back to us north of $77 million that they've made. Like, that's really cool. However, I personally would probably be further along if I just kind of kept that stuff to myself. If Call Porter had just stayed internal, if Ballpoint had just stayed internal for my own stuff. That being said, like, impact is something that drives me. So I don't think I would go back and change things, but I often have people that are like, how do you do it all? And the honest answer is like, it's hard. You're not able to truly focus on one thing at any given day. Like right now I'm shooting YouTube videos for you guys, but I'm also working on website stuff. I'm also working on email stuff. I'm also working on funding projects. So I think kind of having that singular focus of I'm an investor is great. A lot of people give coaches crap because like they don't do deals. Well, it's easier for them to focus on coaching if they're not really doing deals. You know, it's harder to do both, and that makes those guys a little bit more rare. The ninth mistake I made, and this is one that I truly hope you avoid, take from me, don't go learn this one yourself, is like C-class sketchy rentals. We bought some places that looked absolutely incredible on paper, but the reality was a totally different story. Our best rentals were our newer, nicer A-class Vinyl Village places in great school districts. We once had on one of those nicer places, we got a notice from the HOA that like our weeds were too, weedy, I guess, in the front mulch. Told the tenants, I get a picture back of the entire family out there pulling weeds. I was like, wow, that's great. Flip side, with my C-class rentals, we were dealing with things like literally AK-47s bolted to walls, drug dealing, criminal activity, reported police calls, like drama. And then on top of that, we weren't really making money on the places at the end of the day. Like they really weren't cash flowing after all of the issues. We had one early on where like a tenant backed into a neighbor's rose bush, and then the neighbor wanted us to pay for it and called the police. And it's just like, you don't run into that kind of crap typically on newer, nicer stuff, has at least been my experience. The 10th one, and I know I'm guilty of this and you might be too, and that was waiting on other people to make my goals happen. So what that looked like for me early on, I was waiting on realtors or wholesalers to bring me opportunities. Like, hey, what you got? Right? And maybe you can relate. You're like, yeah, I do a flip a quarter because that's all people bring me, but really I'd like to do one a week. Or with things like development deals, I would do things for people hoping to be brought into a larger project or get a smaller cut of equity. And at the end of the day, like, yeah, it might happen. You might have somebody come along that's just a great business partner, and maybe you bring something to the table they don't, or maybe they let you like ride the coattails a little bit. But realistically, my life really changed, and I started to make a lot more money when I just took it into my own hands. Like, okay, look, I'm done waiting on other people to do this for me. My goals, my family, like that's too important. So I'm going to do this myself. I'm going to do the marketing. I'm going to work the leads. I'm going to raise the capital versus like, I hope somebody just brings me money. It's probably not going to happen. I hope somebody just brings me a deal I make 6 figures on. It's probably not going to happen. But if you go out and take that action, it probably will. Thank you for taking the time to watch today's video. Again, my name is Ryan Dossey. If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys next time.